Proverbs chapter 14. Proverbs chapter 14. We're going to look at one verse tonight as it's more of a topical message. Proverbs 14. As we've been going through the book of Proverbs, times we take a stop, and instead of going verse by verse, we stop at a verse and focus on that for a night. So that is what we will do tonight. Proverbs 14 and verse 17 says, "He that is soon angry dealeth foolishly, and a man of wicked devices is hated." And we touched on this verse last week, but I want to focus on the subject of anger. He that is soon angry dealeth foolishly. And so the message tonight is the destructiveness of anger. The destructiveness of anger. This is a topic that, it's good to preach on this, the subject of anger in one way, shape, or form on a semi-regular basis, whether could be a couple times a year, it could be once a year, but it doesn't get old. You could continue going on this subject of anger, and it's such a needy, practical subject that is applicable in so many lives. And I say, I guess once a year isn't semi-regular, but compared to other messages, that is more regular. But I don't necessarily have a set time where I deal with this subject, but it's certainly a good thing to come up from time to time. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word tonight, and for this, how your word is profitable for all different aspects of life and doctrine and how we live. And Lord, we just pray that you would help us now in this subject, the subject of anger, which is such a needy area to deal with in so many lives, and even those of us that maybe don't have an outright anger problem in the sense that we're not soon to be angry, not quick to be angry. Lord, those things can well up within us very, very quickly, even though we aren't as prone as some others are. So Lord, help us all. There's certainly things we can take from this, no matter who we are. And Lord, I pray that you'd help us to apply these things to our lives. Touch each heart in Jesus' name. Amen. As a passenger boarded the Los Angeles to New York plane, he told the flight attendant to wake him and make sure he got off in Dallas. The passenger awoke just as the plane was landing in New York. Furious, he called the flight attendant and demanded an explanation. The fellow mumbled an apology and in a rage, the passenger stomped off the plane. "Boy, was he ever mad," another crew member observed to her errant colleague. "If you think he was mad," replied the flight attendant, "you should have seen the guy I put off the plane in Dallas." They don't do that too much anymore, have multi-stop flights, but I guess sometimes they do, but most of the time that's not the case anymore, as far as the same plane, but I think it still happens. Doctors, actually Josiah and I, when we were on the plane to Minneapolis from Boston, we get on the plane and the flight attendant says, where are you going, or where are you flying, or something like that, I guess he asked. And Josiah just looked at him, because Josiah, the way he's operated is, if someone asks him an obvious question like they should know the answer, he doesn't answer. If the flight attendant's asking him where we're going, basically in Josiah's mind, I think the flight attendant should know, right? Is that what you're thinking? I mean, you didn't answer him right away, or maybe you didn't know what you were thinking, but you weren't thinking anything. So Josiah just got this blank look like, huh? I mean, I don't understand. What's this question about? So where are you going? And then...
Actually, I was thinking that I wanted to get to our seat.
Oh, okay. He was focused on getting to the seat. So then I told Josiah, I said, "No, Josiah, where are we going?" He says, "Minneapolis." He says, or no, did he say, "Are we going to Miami?" He says, "You going to Miami with us?" And he says, No. He says, "Where are you going?" He says, "Minneapolis." And the flight attendant says, "All right, we'll drop you off," he says. And he's a funny guy. But I think I forgot about that part where he said, we're going to Miami. "Are you coming to Miami with us?" "Huh? What?" And then I said, "Well, where are we going, Josiah?" "Minneapolis." And so he was funny. Doctors from this was from the Spokesman Review, I guess a newspaper, in July 29th, 1993. Doctors from Coral Gables, Florida, compared the efficiency of the heart's pumping action in 18 men with coronary artery disease to 9 healthy controls. Each of the study's participants underwent 1 physical stress test, riding an exercise bicycle, and 3 mental stress tests, doing math problems in their heads, recalling a recent incident that had made them very angry, and giving a short speech to defend themselves against the hypothetical charge of shoplifting. Using sophisticated X-ray techniques, the doctors took pictures of the subjects' hearts in action during these tests. For all the subjects, anger reduced the amount of blood that the heart pumped to the body tissues more than the other tests, but this was especially true for those who had heart disease. And this newspaper said, why anger is so much more potent than fear or mental stress is anybody's guess, but until we see more research on this subject, it couldn't hurt to count to 10 before you blow your stack. And then a lady once came to Billy Sunday and tried to rationalize her angry outbursts. There's nothing wrong with losing my temper, she said. I blow up and then it's all over. So does a shotgun, Sunday replied, and look at the damage it leaves behind. As Billy Sunday is recalling that. What is anger? Anger, according to the Webster's 1828 dictionary, is a violent passion of the mind excited by a real or supposed injury, usually accompanied with a propensity to take vengeance or to obtain satisfaction from the offending party. This passion, however, varies in degrees of violence, and in ingenious minds may be attended only with a desire or to reprove or chide the offender. So what it is, it's a violent stirring up on the inside. It's, we use the phrase, get your blood boiling or get hot under the collar. That's because it's a welling up of emotion that is it just wants to pour out. It has to do with I'm hurt or I think I've been hurt, and so I'm going to lash out somehow. And it says usually accompanied with a propensity to take vengeance or to obtain satisfaction from the offending party. So anger is the emotion, but then there are actions that come out as a result of the anger. And so there are some who do manage to temper that when it wells up within them and it does not result in outbursts. But then there are others where they're known for being much more expressive when they have anger welling up, rising up within them. There's three things tonight about the destructiveness of anger I want to look at. There are various angles to focus on when it comes to anger in the Bible. Now, with anger in the Bible, we're not addressing righteous anger of God and Jesus Christ. We're not addressing that tonight. We are also not addressing, just as Paul, his spirit was stirred within him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. So there's nothing wrong with having a stirring up on the inside if it's something that's stirring us up to the right actions. That is different than anger, that anger leads to sin. When we have anger that is directed towards someone else, or that is, let's put it this way, when we have anger that is focused on us, a hurt or some injustice done to us, that it has something to do with us, then that is what leads to sin. With Paul, when he was stirred because he saw the city wholly given to idolatry, he was stirred up in his spirit not because of him. It had to do with these people are not worshiping the one true God. They're worshiping idols. And so what did he do? He preached. He didn't go on a tangent and a violent outburst or anything like that, because he was stirred up to something that was on God's behalf, but that then led him to do the right things. And so there are times we need to get stirred up. So that's not what the message is about tonight, getting stirred up to the right things. To stirred up that would lead us to do the right things, to take action in some way that would be in an appropriate sense. Tonight is the anger that is destructive. It is the destructiveness of anger. Anger that it has to do with that is focused on ourselves. It has to do with our lives, what injustices, what hurts, what other things that make us angry, and that the anger that leads to sin, that stirring up, that violent passion of the mind gets stirred up that is anger. So number one, anger destroys reputations. This verse here that we started with, verse 17 of chapter 14, says, "He that is soon angry dealeth foolishly." Now you see that the wording of Scripture here, he that is soon angry, that is someone who is easily provoked to anger. And so everybody obviously has gotten angry at some point in time. But there are sometimes, but everyone's different as far as their level of how easily they are provoked to anger. I mean, there are some people, it doesn't take much at all to get them angry, and you know it. Then there are other people that they could face the same thing. I mean, the same thing could happen to them, the same thing could be said to them, and they don't get as angry. Why is that? That has to do with the level of and partially how the event that happens that makes a person angry or could make a person angry. Part of it depends on how that is processed. Part of that depends on how it is received. And, or actually much of that depends on how it is received. And so here, this is a person, he that is soon angry dealeth foolishly. What happens to people who blow their top really quickly? They do foolish things. They look silly. What does so what does that do to the reputation? Well, now all of a sudden, they don't have the greatest reputation because here's this person who just does foolish and silly things, when they get upset. And people know that. People take notice, and they will keep that in the back of their mind. Oh, yeah, this person, oh, yeah, they do foolish things. They get angry. You don't want to set this person off. I forget what year it was, but some years ago there was a basketball game that was going on, and sometimes sports players get easily provoked. And that happened, and a guy went in for, I don't know if he went in to try to dunk the ball or lay it up, and this was in Detroit, Pistons and the Pacers, Indiana Pacers. And so this guy goes in, and he got fouled really hard, but he took exception to it, and there was just a little bit of a shove, and it seemed like everything was going all right. Everybody's getting calmed down. And except this one guy was he was upset, but they got everybody separated, and the guy who was really getting really upset, his name is Ron Artest, he went over and he laid down on the scorer's table just to settle down. They were trying to settle him down. Things seemed to be simmering. Well, then all of a sudden, somebody in the stands, now Ron Artest, I believe at the time, played for the Pacers, so he was visiting Detroit. His team was visiting. Somebody in the stands threw a cup or something of some beverage, and it landed right on Ron Artest as he's laying there trying to get calmed down. Well, guess what? He just lost it. He jumped up and he ran up into the stands, and he started trying to find who this guy was, and he starts literally beating up on this guy. The problem was it was the wrong guy. And it started this whole brawl in the stands, fans getting involved. It was a mess. It was an embarrassment to the NBA, and they took some steps to, try to, basically that wouldn't happen anymore. But it all got started because, number one, because one player got really angry because he took exception to a hard foul. There's nothing dirty about the foul. He just didn't like how hard it was, and that's part of basketball, is sometimes there's hard fouls. But what also happened was this cup being thrown. Now, you don't necessarily want to be too hard on Ron Artest because, what if you were laying there and just trying to calm down? All of a sudden, here comes this beverage right into your face and almost basically hit him in the head or in the chest right near the head. We might be really upset about that too. But would you go up, would you run up into the stands and start beating up on the guy? I hope not. But that's what he did. And it was right near the end of the game. And they ended up not finishing the game. They said, that's it, because literally people are throwing stuff. And the video is out there. Just type in Malice at the Palace. That's what they call it, Malice at the Palace, because at the time their arena was called the Palace of Auburn Hills. I'm not sure if they still call it that, but if they have a new arena. But it's Palace of Auburn Hills, so they called it Malice at the Palace. And it is something else. It's unlike pretty much anything you'll see in a sporting event. Just the level of how crazy people were going at that one time. And it was because of someone being soon angry, quick to get angry. And I don't know if this had anything to do with it, but Ron Artest later actually changed his name to Meta World Peace. And so he played basketball with Meta World Peace on his jersey, and I forget if he switched teams once or twice. He then played for the Lakers, and so I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I'm guessing that was a traumatic event in his life in a number of people's lives that apparently left such an impression. Maybe that's why he changed his name. I don't know for sure. I don't know the background of his name change, if he got into Eastern religion or whatever it was. But anyway, that was his name. I guess that's his name now, Meta World Peace. And it's been for a number of years. But soon angry. Now, how foolish, if you were to watch that video, how foolish do these guys look, these grown men going after these stands? Now, by the way, from someone like me who likes, who finds it funny to see chairs being busted over people's heads, as we addressed, was that last week, I think. In some ways it can be kind of humorous, like, oh my goodness, look at this. But in reality, it's not funny. It's a real event. If you were there witnessing that real event, it would not be funny. It was actually a very serious, a very bad thing. And but I mean, but in some ways it's funny in the sense of how silly does this look? How foolish to see all these people just brawling, and they're at a basketball game, and how foolish is that? And that's something that lives on. I'm still talking about it, however many years later. I mean, this was a good number of years ago. I think it was maybe been at least 15 years ago. But that's what happened. And how foolish. What's the reputation now? Apparently, Meta World Peace, if that's why he changed his name, he had a reputation as Ron Artest. He didn't want to be Ron Artest anymore for some reason. And maybe Ron Artest just sounds like too much of a violent name. I don't know. But Artest, that sounds fierce. It sounds strong. Artest. He's a pretty good basketball player in college, and I think in somewhat in the pros. But anger destroys reputations. Look down at verse 29 of the same chapter. He that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is hasty of spirit exalteth folly. What's exalting folly? Well, that's being hasty of spirit, being soon angry, and hasty of spirit can be a little more all-encompassing than just simply being angry. But you see the opposite here is that he that is slow to wrath. So the opposite of slow to wrath would be being hasty of spirit, so that's why we see the connection with anger. Exalteth folly. What gets exalted when people get angry? Foolishness, just dumb things. And that affects reputation. It affects the testimony. Think about the testimony, think about the testimony of a believer who is quick to get angry. What kind of testimony is that to the world? That's a bad testimony. They have a bad reputation. I saw an example of this just yesterday, and I'm not going to go into it because of who it was, but I saw an example of this, and I thought, what kind of testimony is that? If someone professes to be a believer and is getting angry, and what kind of testimony is that for the Lord? What kind of testimony is that to the world? And there's times people in the world who are lost, sometimes they are less angry than Christians can be at times. And what kind of testimony is that? So anger destroys reputations, it destroys testimonies. It is not a good example to others. Number two, anger destroys relationships. Turn to Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22. Anger destroys relationships. Proverbs 22 verses 24 and 25. Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul. Who we spend most of our time around, who we're closest to, has an impact on us and our actions and our attitudes, and it's those. So there's a warning here. Make no friendship with an angry man. If there's someone who has reputation of being angry and you can see that they're an angry person, that is not a person you should spend most of your time around. You should not necessarily become a close friend of them because you yourself are going to get a snare, and you yourself could also be angry. You can turn into an angry person as well because of that influence. And so it destroys relationships. So don't we want good relationships with people? Certainly we should, but it's hard to have a good relationship. We're cautioned against a close relationship with a person who is an angry person. Why? Because when there's an angry person and that emanates from them, it infects everybody around them. It really does. It's an infection. It has an impact. It's a serious thing. Turn to Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15. We'll see another example here. Is actually a parable. where anger was a hindrance to a relationship. Luke chapter 15, and this is the parable of the prodigal son. Luke 15 verse 11 says, "And he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and he will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. So to summarize a little more, the father said, Bring forth the best robe, put a ring on his hand, shoes on his feet, bring the fatted calf, let's have a party, because my son was dead and is alive again, he's lost and is found. They began to be merry. Now look at verse 25. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said unto him, Thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. What's the response here? Verse 28 says, And he was angry and would not go in. What was his response? His brother coming back? Anger. What was his response to this party being thrown because his brother came back? Anger. And what was his reason? Oh, they're throwing a party for him. He's the one who went out and did all these things. And, he gets the party. I don't get the party. He's angry about this. So what do you think now this is a parable, of course, but, thinking that if this was a true story, what would the relationship be like in that condition if the older brother is angry with the younger brother? Well, they're not going to have a very good relationship because of his anger toward, it could be toward his brother, it could be toward his father, it could be toward any number of people there in that situation. Could just be overall resentment. But they're not going to have a good relationship if he continues with that kind of an attitude. Anger destroys relationships. Verse 28, the end of verse 28 says, Therefore came his father out and entreated him. And he answering said unto his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment. And yet thou never gavest me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. Now the older brother is a picture of the Pharisees. That's the focus of this. That Jesus is painting a picture of, notice he says, I've never transgressed your commandment at any time. Yeah, right, sure. Never? I mean, even the best behaved children do transgress their parents' commandment. But that was the Pharisees' attitude. They were angry at the publicans and sinners for getting the attention of Jesus. They were coming to Jesus, trusting in Him. Jesus is trying to deliver them from their sin. He wants to deliver them from their sin. And the Pharisees are angry about this. He's giving the picture here. These are self-righteous people. What's the proper response? Well, not to be angry, but to be merry, to rejoice. That yes, your brother who's lost, he's now found. He's gone away, but now he's come back. Isn't that cause for rejoicing? But here he's fixated on, yeah, but he went out and did that. I've been here and I've never transgressed your commandment. That's quite an exaggeration there, I'm sure. But in he says, end of verse 29, Yet thou never gavest me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son was come, now notice he says, thy son. He's in some ways it's like a disowning there. He doesn't say my brother, he says thy son, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. So there's kind of a feigned outrage here on behalf of his father. Well, see, look at these injustices he's done to you. He's devoured thy living. Thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad, for this thy brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. And so the whole point of this is that there's reason to be glad, to make merry, because the lost has been found. The dead has been alive, so to speak. But anger hindered his relationship, and in regard, it destroys. It would if he continued in that state, it would destroy his relationship with his brother, and then ultimately it really hinder his relationship with his father as well. Anger destroys relationships. Number 3, anger destroys real lives. Anger destroys real lives. There's real people at stake here. Turn to Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4. Anger destroys real lives. Ephesians chapter 4, look at verse 26. It says, Be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. Be ye angry and sin not. Now some use this as an excuse. Well, you know what? I can get angry as long as I don't sin. No, what is it saying? Be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. The whole point of that is, if you're angry, you need to get your anger taken care of. If you have the emotions, if you have anger welling up within you, you need to take care of that anger before it leads to sin. Before it leads to more sin, other sin. Because what happens? When people get angry, they do things that are sinful. They say things that are sinful. They do things that otherwise, if they weren't angry, they would not do or say. And then notice verse 27, it says, Neither give place to the devil. And this is a connection. 26 is connected with 27. You can see that there with the colon. So anger, not dealing with anger, letting the sun go down upon your wrath, in other words, staying angry about something, gives place to the devil. Anger destroys real lives. What does the devil do with people's lives? He destroys them. He destroys them. So not only can other people's lives be destroyed, think about the crimes that are committed because of anger. Think about the murders that have taken place, the violence that takes place because of anger. Think about the broken families, broken homes, broken marriages, broken churches, all these things that are destroyed, lives that are destroyed because of anger. That's giving place to the devil. The devil has come to steal, kill, and destroy. He's the one. That's what he does. He destroys, and he'll use anger to do it. And when a person gets angry, they're opening themselves up to the influence of the devil. They're giving place, they're giving ground or territory in the devil's life. In their life to the devil's influences and the devil's wiles. And so while a person is just perpetually angry or quick to be angry, they're not going to have complete and total true victory that God wants them to have, because they're still giving ground, they're still giving territory to the devil in their life. Anger destroys real lives. Now maybe it's good to ask the question, well, what causes anger? What are the root causes of anger? That's really important to be able to identify that. It's not just simply anger management. Well, we need to get your anger under control. No, we need to get to the root cause of what causes anger in the first place. And pretty much across the board, when I'm around people, well, let's say if I get angry myself, or if I'm around people that get angry, it really all comes back to one of just a few things. Well, think about the prodigal son, the prodigal son's brother. What was it with him? Oh, it was self-centeredness. It was self-centeredness. It was pride. For others, it's an issue of control. And I think this is a big one. Oh, the self-centeredness one as well. And self-centeredness and control go hand in hand in a lot of ways. It's an issue of control. What makes people angry is when things are happening outside of their control. Things that they don't like, things that are unpleasant, things that maybe they disagree with. Things that are outside of their control, And so if I'm not in control, the next response is just simply to get angry because I'm out of control. I can't control this situation. I can't control this circumstance. That example of that I just saw yesterday was an issue with that. And like I said, I'm not going to go into it. But so control is an issue. There's a lot of people with control issues. And you know what actually I don't want to jump ahead here. I was going to say what the answer to control is, but we'll get there. So self-centeredness, it's all about me. Well, you know what? If it's all about me, then I've got to be the one in control. If it's all about me and what I want and the way I think things should be, and people, if they can't handle that, if they don't get that addressed, they become angry people. They lose it. They get all welled up when things aren't going their way because, well, it's all about me and I want to be in control. Another thing that causes anger in people's lives is if there are hurts that are unresolved, hurts that are not healed. Hurts that are not healed. And I've seen this before as well in the life of a person who was angry, but he did not want to take it out on others that he loved, so he actually took it out on himself. And I'm going to get into a little more here than maybe I intend to that should be saved for another time, but what happens when people are harming themselves? That's an issue that a lot of times people don't like to talk about in public. It's more of a private thing because it's a very personal issue. But there are people who harm themselves, like cutting, especially for girls. That's a big issue. Eating disorders, and a number of things like that. And what is it that drives people to do that? What causes that? Well, it's some sort of hurt in their life. Or one of these things that I've mentioned. For a lot of people, it's hurt that has turned into anger, and they're angry people. And so when they hurt themselves, that means they don't want to hurt other people that they do love, but it could have been those people that actually hurt them. But they don't really want to lash out against them, so they internalize it, and then it comes out harming themselves. It could be, once again, it could be a control issue. It might not be that they've been hurt. It could just simply be someone is so obsessed with control and they need to have control of every aspect of their life. Things need to be just right, that they can't handle it, and so they get angry and they get stressed, and the only way to let it out and find some relief is to harm themselves. Or often what you see is they harm other people. So the outworking of that is different among various, depending on who it is. It's either manifested outwardly at people, or it's internalized, or sometimes people internalize it so long then it comes out very strongly. I think of that when I hear about, let's say, like a school shooting or something. My first thought is, I wonder what was going on in that shooter's life, in that, say if it's a student in that school and they go in and they shoot, or if it's a young person or an older person. But one of my first thoughts is, and I don't know the person, so I'm not necessarily going to speculate or guess in these situations, but I do wonder. Sometimes I maybe pay attention to what the person is like, maybe some descriptions about their life. And usually you don't have to look too far. You can find some symptoms of what was maybe deep down harboring inside of the anger. Now, and it can vary, like in the Columbine school shooting, it was, these people were just literally rebellious devil worshipers that hated Christianity, hated God. But once again, they were angry people. I don't know what drove them to that anger. I don't know what was in their lives that led them to that. Now, if you spend too much time, messing around with the devil, you're going to be a more angry person. But it could be there's hurts that have people have dealt with, and then also anger can result from a lack of acceptance or maybe a lack of compassion for mistakes. If I get angry at someone for, say, a mistake they make, or something, maybe it is a dumb thing they do or a wrong thing they do. If I get angry at that person, probably it's too high that. Well, what is my standard? Well, my standard apparently is perfection, that nobody's going to make a mistake. And so there's a lack of acceptance or a lack of compassion upon a person who does sin or make a mistake, and my response is, maybe getting angry or upset with them in some way, and that could be also a cause, something that leads to anger. We need to recognize that Jesus Christ was the embodiment of compassion. When he got angry, he didn't get angry at the things that maybe you and I would think that it would make more sense to get angry at. He didn't go just railing against these sinners, these people that were just dead in their trespasses and sins. They're just dealing with, their lives are immersed in these various aspects of wickedness. Who did he reserve most of his anger for? It was actually the self-righteous ones who thought they were so high and mighty. Oh, we have no sin. We're so good on the outside. That's who he reserved the most of his anger for. And of course, Jesus Christ's righteous anger. And so we also need to have the heart of compassion toward people. That does not mean we condone sin. And there's times when, if I get up behind a pulpit, I might just say some pretty strong things about sin. Preaching about fornication this morning, that fornication is filthy and it's ungodly and it's wicked. But you know what? How I get up and I preach, I might say some strong things preaching, but I might not approach it the same way if I'm talking individually to a person and dealing with their own issues, their specific situation. I would not get angry with them and, well, how filthy and wretched and vile are you, Russ? How filthy and wretched and vile are you with your lifestyle and your sin? It's one thing to preach about something from the Word. It's another thing in our dealings with individual people. That we don't always have to preach them a sermon when we're dealing with individual people. The sermon is for the pulpit. It's not for the one-on-one conversation. And so often the lack of acceptance, when we just, how could you do such a thing? So what's the standard? In other words, you expect more than perhaps what is warranted, especially if you're expecting perfection. But why would there be perfection? Because probably it comes then back to self-centeredness, that it's all about me and a reflection on me. And certainly, especially if it's parents and children, that's probably where this shows up the most, is that if I get angry with one of my children for making a mistake, with messing up, and I just lash out at them, probably it's just more of a self-centeredness problem on my part. That my children aren't going to make mistakes. Well, every child makes a mistake. Every child does wrong things. Every child sins. And so we need to recognize that, have a heart of compassion, and also then patience. Patience is a big one that can help remedy that anger welling up within us, that we would respond properly instead of in anger. Turn to Psalm 37. Psalm 37. So we get here to them. What's the opposite of self-centeredness, control, just unresolved, unhealed hurts, and this lack of acceptance or compassion for mistakes that people make? Psalm 37. Now this, in its direct context, deals with fret not thyself because of evildoers. So what is your response when there are wicked people? What is your response to the wicked? When you see all this wickedness around, there are a lot of people who stand for the right things and they see the wickedness and they just can't handle it. They just get angry. It cannot handle the reality that we live in a corrupt, fallen world that's waxing worse and worse spiritually. And so the response is to get angry. Well, the Bible says that's not what to do. But notice, I'm not going to focus on this whole portion here in the first 8 verses, but I want to focus on the key points. And by the way, it's possible we may come to this psalm pretty soon on midweek service, because we're getting up pretty close to it. So I might give you a rerun. But this psalm is good for a rerun, by the way, particularly this first part of the psalm. But trust in the Lord. Now, so that's what I wanted to focus on as far as the control. What's the opposite of control? When a person feels the need, they've got to be in complete control of their circumstances. The opposite of that is trusting in the Lord. Trusting in the Lord, you know what? If I'm trusting the Lord, I don't have to be in control. I'm allowing God to be God. I'm allowing God to be in control. And we need to recognize that most things in life are out of our control. The vast majority of circumstances that we face in life, around us, in society, in town, and whatever it may be, even in family, there are so many things that are outside of our control. And when people don't accept that, that's what then leads to the stress and anxiety and the anger rising up because, you know what, this is out of my control. But most things in life are out of our control. And so a lot of times what people do is they'll spend their life building a life where they can control things. They can control things. And I had a person tell me, it was not too long ago, someone who is last I knew, over in Brookline at a mental institution. And this person said, well, basically, he keeps having these attacks, these outbursts, these panic attacks, whatever the situation, whatever led this person to be over there. And you know what that person said afterwards, right after saying, basically, I'm back here, I'm, because of this, and this. You know what the person said? Things just haven't been going right for me lately. Speaking of circumstances in life. And I thought, that's really telling. That's really interesting, even coming from a person like that, in that situation, that even maybe unwittingly, he makes the connection. I could see the connection. Makes the connection that there are a lot of things that aren't going well, circumstances not going well. And therefore, this is the response. Now, in this particular person, I don't know if there's other physiological, mental things that are going on, but I do know that this person is a more needing to be in control type of person, insecure, needs to have control of his circumstances. And you know what? Then when things start to go wrong and you've got to be the one in control, that's when breakdowns happen, particularly for those who are weaker-minded, feeble-minded. And guess what? We go to the nursing home. You know what happens when people don't deal with those things earlier on in life? Then they start to come out later in life, even when they're 70, 80 years old in the nursing home. And the problem is then, at that point in their life, it's harder to hold it in. That's why there's so many medicated people, because they can't hold it in any longer. Their minds are weaker. It's just like a child. A child has a weaker mind, and they don't hold in their emotions as much. But then you kind of mature and you learn how to process things, and unless somebody has some actual physical medical issue, and then that you kind of reach that peak, that plateau, and then all of a sudden back down you go. So the advice is, what I say to you tonight is, if you got issues in your life, you better get them taken care of before you get too old to be able to take care of it, and they start to come out. And you can't control it. But it was telling that there was the connection between this mental breakdown and things just haven't been going right for me. What does that tell me? Well, it tells me this person, who means well, by the way, I'm not knocking this person, but the person needs to trust in the Lord. I mean, really trust in the Lord and yield control of his circumstances to the Lord. And to realize that just because something bad happens doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Most bad things happen, they do eventually get resolved somehow. And we just need to have patience and let these things in the hand of the Lord. Trust in the Lord and do good. What's the opposite of that? It would be being angry and sinning. Verse 4, delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. So there's delighting in the Lord, committing thy way to the Lord. If you trust the Lord enough, you'll commit your way to him. Then you don't have to be in control of every aspect of your life, because you've committed the whole path of your life to the Lord. And then look at verse 7. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Once again, this is in the context of God dealing with the wicked, with the evildoers. But there are great principles here about just everyday life when it comes to fretting and being angry. Verse 8, cease from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. In other words, you need to get rid of that, stop being angry, forsake wrath, put that aside, turn your back on it. Fret not. Fret means to glow or blaze in anger or zeal. And that fretting, that stirring up, getting hot under the collar, your blood boiling, that leads to evil. That's why he says, fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. Don't let this lead to evil. You need to deal with it. You need to take care of it. And then it'll keep you back from sins, from evil. Anger is such a destructive thing. Just countless lives have been destroyed because of anger. Reputations have been destroyed. Relationships have been destroyed, or at the very least damaged. They're not all always destroyed, but at least damaged. Reputations damaged. And then anger also damages and destroys real lives because of what happens. What are the outworking? What are the ramifications of that anger? What are the actions and words that result from that anger? It destroys lives. So the answer is, you know what? We need to, if there's anger in someone's life here tonight, or maybe you do find yourself at times being stirred up. Maybe it's a particular person. There's times we're patient with one person and then another person does the same thing and we're quicker to get angry with them. That happens. So what we need to do tonight, if we even are prone to those things, maybe we aren't quick to get angry in general, but we still have these, we're all prone to this, that we need to identify the root issue. What is the root issue? Is there some pride in my life that I'm the one who sets the bar, I'm the one who sets the standard, and if somebody doesn't meet my standard, I'm going to get angry with them? Is it an issue of control? Is there an area of your life or just the whole path of your life you need to yield control of to God? And say, you know what, Lord, I'm in your hands. I'm out of control in this situation. I'm thankful that the Lord blessed with my car repair this past week. And as far as I can tell, the issue that they thought it was, the symptoms lined up with, they took care of it, and it was under extended warranty because it was a service bulletin, or it wasn't a recall, full-fledged recall, but it was that part was under extended warranty because of a known defect. And so I didn't have to pay a dime. Now, I did lose some Uber driving time because of it. It got worse and worse, and I just can't keep driving it like this. And so, that was an issue. And here's the thing. There's been a few things that happened lately that I can just feel like, it feels like the screws are being turned in some way in life. The thing I need to be doing, something prevents me from doing it. And I'm thinking of another thing. There's a few things lately. And I feel like, Lord, I can either get angry about it, or I can just, all right, Lord, what are you doing? What are you doing in this? Can maybe yield control to Him and say, all right, and just realize, there has to be the realization, these things that are happening are out of my control. Now, to resolve the situation, there need to be some steps that I'm taking, but it requires patience. It requires some time, maybe a few days, maybe a week, or whatever the situation is. And so the Lord blessed the car. And now it seems to be working fine. But oftentimes in the moment, which maybe most of us later come to regret, when things go wrong in the moment, we start to get a bit hot under the collar. Now, I will say it was, and I told my wife this, we were driving in Philadelphia. I didn't do a great job driving on this trip. I made a few mistakes. All right, I guess I was still light enough on the gas pedal. The fuel economy was good. The Lord bless the fuel economy. According to the van, I don't know if the numbers are right, we got 28 miles of the gallon from the time I filled up in New Jersey to by the time we got back here. It was like 20, although I said, right before we got to the Greenfield exit, it went down to 27.9. I mean, come on. So I can't even say 28, but round up to 28. So that was great. That was wonderful. I don't know how accurate it is, but in that particular vehicle, but thank the Lord. But, but there were other things that, we were, what gets people so angry, and it's an issue that's completely out of our control, is getting stuck in traffic. Now, by the way, go to Philadelphia during rush hour, go to Boston during rush hour, go to New York during rush hour, or maybe go to New York anytime almost. And you'll find them. And you know what gets me the most riled up is not Boston, not New York, not Philly, but Hartford. I don't like Hartford. I don't like driving through Hartford during rush hour. I don't know what it is about Hartford, but it's painful, yeah. But what gets people riled up is dealing with traffic. But here's the real issue that gets people riled up is impatience. That's the root of the issue. It's not the traffic, it's the impatience. Or it could be, I didn't leave myself enough time. We went to my sister's, the reception they had there at her university graduation, her individual college. It was having their graduation ceremony Thursday evening. They had a reception there in that building. And so we got there, we drove down there, we went straight there. And then we had to go over to the hotel, and it's about a half-hour drive to the hotel in New Jersey, and cross over the river there, Delaware River. So the plan was we go to the reception, go to the hotel, check in, then go back. I'll take Josiah and Eliana to the college graduation. It was going to be 2.5 hours, so we didn't want to take all the younger, the youngest ones. And so that was the plan, but the problem was we didn't leave in enough time from the reception to get over to the hotel and then back for the graduation in time. So we're coming into the graduation with, a little bit late, a few minutes late actually. And so what? What's the reason for getting upset about getting placed late? Well, oftentimes it's embarrassing to us. It's embarrassing to walk into, a big arena and go down and have to go crawl across several people down the row. That's embarrassing. So what does it happen? Well, once again, comes back to out of control, lack of control, or self-centeredness. And so there can be an urgency, nothing wrong with urgency, but urgency and anger are different things. And but there were times as I was starting to say that about the trip. There was a couple times I missed an exit, or maybe at least one, a couple times. One time I missed an exit. We're going to go across the George Washington Bridge, and I ended up, it's like there's this way's the lower level, or maybe, lower level with just cars. This is the way to go with trucks too on the upper level. And then there's a straight way to go. Well, I accidentally ended up going the straight way. And so I had to drive, got off the highway. Thankfully, I made a couple of the correct turns and looked at the GPS, made a couple of the correct turns, and were able to get easily on the bridge, thankfully. But we can choose to respond to those situations in the right way. Now, there were times I was kind of upset with myself. I wasn't actually losing it, getting angry, like, just, having a rage or anything. I was just kind of upset with myself, like, oh my goodness, There's times we do that in good nature and we're not truly just welling up with anger. And so that's what I told my wife. I said, I'm not really necessarily angry. It's kind of frustrating to myself to do this. But we all have choices to make in every day of our lives. How are we going to respond to circumstances? How are we going to respond to things that are out of our control, and even things that are in our control, things that we have our hands on? And what happens when we mess up? What happens when we mess up something in life? Do we get angry with ourselves? There's people who live angry with themselves. How are we going to respond? We need to respond by ceasing from anger, forsaking wrath. Be angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. We need to yield control to God, have patience, If there's hurts in our lives that we're harboring something against someone else, we need to forgive them. We need to have a heart of forgiveness toward them. We need to let them off the hook. We need to let ourselves off the hook if we're angry with ourselves about something. If there's something we do need to confess to God, confess it to God and realize that His forgiveness is there. And so we need to let ourselves off the hook too. So we need to humble ourselves, yield control to God. Recognize the destructiveness of anger. We just can't afford to be angry. The people around us can't afford for us to be angry. We need to deal with that. We need help with it every day. We need help with it all the time. Let God mold and shape your life to be more in His image and having the character of Jesus Christ in our lives.